The set was unusually quiet that morning. Not the focused quiet of people ready to work, but the cautious kind, the kind that settles in when everyone is trying not to be noticed. Crew members spoke softly. Movements were measured. No one lingered where they didn't have to. Anthony Hopkins noticed it the moment he stepped onto the soundstage. He always did. Call time was early, but Hopkins had been there even earlier, as was his habit. Script already marked. Lines already lived with. He believed preparation wasn't something you announced, it was something other people felt when you walked into a room. The scene scheduled for that morning involved a child actor. Young, talented, quiet in the way children often become when surrounded by adults who treat intensity like currency. The child sat off to the side with a guardian and a dialogue coach, swinging their legs gently, rehearsing lines under their breath. Hopkins greeted the child first. "Morning," he said kindly, not bending down, not performing warmth, just acknowledging them as a fellow professional. The child nodded, a small smile appearing, then disappearing just as quickly. Hopkins clocked that too. The director arrived moments later. He was known for his edge. That was the word people used when they wanted to avoid saying more precise things. He believed pressure created performance. That discomfort sharpened truth. Hopkins had worked with many directors like that. Some learned, some didn't. The director clapped his hands once. "Let's move. We're behind already." They weren't. But no one corrected him. The first rehearsal began. The child actor delivered their lines softly, accurately, but tentatively. The director stopped them mid-sentence. "Again," he said. "Louder. You're not in your living room." The child tried again. Voice shook slightly. "Again," the director snapped. "You're acting scared. Don't act scared." Hopkins said nothing. "Not yet." The director paced. "This isn't complicated. Hit the emotion." The child looked toward the guardian instinctively. The director noticed. "Eyes on me," he said sharply. "Don't look at them." The guardian stiffened. Hopkins felt something tighten, not anger, not outrage. Attention. The rehearsal resumed. The child missed a cue. The director exhaled sharply, walked closer. "You're not listening," he said. "I'm sorry," the child whispered. The director scoffed. "Sorry doesn't help me." He reached out. Not violently, not dramatically, but he put a hand on the child's shoulder and squeezed, hard enough that the child flinched. The room froze. Time did something strange in moments like that. It didn't slow. It clarified. Hopkins saw everything. The squeeze. The flinch. The way the child's eyes dropped immediately. The way every adult in the room failed to move. The director leaned down slightly. "You want to be an actor? Then act." The child nodded quickly, blinking back tears. That was when Hopkins stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He simply entered the space. Calm, unmistakable. "Stop," Hopkins said. The word wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. The director straightened, surprised more than anything. "What?" Hopkins looked at the director's hand, still resting on the child's shoulder. "Remove your hand," Hopkins said. The director laughed once, incredulous. "We're working." Hopkins didn't look at him. "Please," Hopkins said again, to the child this time. "Step over here." The child moved immediately, almost running, standing beside Hopkins without being told again. The director's face hardened. "Tony, we don't have time for this set is paused," Hopkins said. The words landed like a full stop. The first AD looked between them, unsure. The producer shifted uncomfortably. The director scoffed. "You're overreacting." Hopkins finally looked at him. "No," he said. "I'm reacting accurately." The director crossed his arms. "You saw pressure. That's how you get performances." Hopkins shook his head once. "What I saw," he said, "was an adult putting hands on a child." Silence. The director rolled his eyes. "You're being dramatic." Hopkins' voice did not change. "This is not your rehearsal technique," he said. "This is a boundary." The producer stepped in nervously. "Let's all take a breath." "No," Hopkins said, gently but firmly. "Let's be precise." He turned to the child's guardian. "Are you all right?" he asked. The guardian nodded, though their jaw was tight. "Yes. Thank you." Hopkins turned back to the director. You don't touch actors, Hopkins said. Ever. And you certainly don't touch children. The director laughed again, louder this time. You think I hit them? Hopkins didn't answer the question directly. I think, he said. You believe fear is a tool. The director's smile faded. That's my job, he said. To push. Hopkins nodded. Not like that. The director stepped closer now, voice low. You trying to embarrass me? Hopkins met his gaze. I'm trying to stop you, he said. The room felt like it was holding its breath. The director looked around, searching for support. He found none. This is ridiculous, the director said. We're burning daylight. Hopkins nodded. Then let it burn. The director stared at him. You don't get to shut down my set. Hopkins replied calmly. I do when a child's involved. That was the moment the power shifted. Not because Hopkins was famous, because he was unequivocal. The producer cleared her throat. Maybe we should. We should end this conversation, Hopkins said. And start another one. The director laughed harshly. About what? About accountability, Hopkins replied. The director's eyes narrowed. You think the studio's going to back you on this? Hopkins considered the question. I think, he said. They'll back the truth. The director scoffed. You're naive. Hopkins shook his head. I've been here a long time, he said. I know what ends careers. The director smirked. And you think this is it? Hopkins answered honestly. I think this is the moment people remember, he said. The director took a step back, suddenly uncertain. Hopkins turned to the first AD. Please escort the child and their guardian to a safe space, he said. Filming is done for the day. The AD hesitated, then nodded and moved. The child looked up at Hopkins. Am I in trouble? They asked quietly. Hopkins bent slightly, not down to their level but closer. No, he said. You did nothing wrong. The child nodded, relief spilling over their face. As they walked away, Hopkins turned back to the director one final time. This conversation will continue, Hopkins said. But not here. The director tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. You're blowing this out of proportion. Hopkins replied simply. No, he said. I'm ending it. The set remained silent long after Hopkins walked away. Because everyone there understood something instinctively. This wasn't a disagreement about process. This was a line being drawn. And what happened next behind closed doors in meetings that didn't involve cameras, and decisions that didn't make headlines, would ensure the director never stood on a set like this again. That part of the story hadn't unfolded yet. But the ending had already been decided. The meetings began that afternoon. Quiet ones. Not the kind with raised voices or dramatic exits, but the kind that happen behind closed doors, where phones are set face down and words are chosen carefully because everyone understands the stakes. Anthony Hopkins wasn't in the first meeting. He didn't need to be. The producer spoke first, replaying the moment exactly as it happened. No embellishment. No interpretation. Just facts. A child actor. A hand placed in anger. A visible flinch. A set frozen in silence. The legal team listened without interrupting. The studio representative asked one question. Was there contact? The answer came immediately. Yes. That was enough to change the tone of the room. By the time Hopkins was asked to join later that evening, the decision was already leaning in one direction. He walked in calmly, jacket still on, posture unchanged from that morning. He wasn't there to argue. He was there to confirm. They asked him to recount what he saw. Hopkins did so precisely. No objectives. No morales pitis. Just observation. I saw an adult put his hand on a child with force, he said. I saw the child recoil. I saw fear. One executive cleared his throat. Was it violent? Hopkins met his gaze. It was unnecessary, he said. That's the standard. Silence followed. Another executive tried carefully. Do you believe it was malicious? Hopkins shook his head. I believe it was habitual. That word landed harder than any accusation. Habitual meant pattern. Pattern meant risk. And risk when it involved children meant zero tolerance. The director was brought in last. He walked into the room defensive, already framing the narrative in his mind. He spoke before anyone asked him to. "This is being blown out of proportion," he said. "I never hit anyone. I was correcting performance." Hopkins watched him quietly. The studio head spoke calmly. "Did you touch the child?" The director hesitated. "Yes," he said. "But..." The studio head raised a hand. "That's enough," he said. The director turned toward Hopkins, frustration spilling over. "You're really going to let this end my career?" he snapped. Hopkins didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was level. "I didn't end anything," he said. "I stopped something." The director scoffed. "You think you're some moral authority now?" Hopkins looked at him. Not with anger, but with something closer to disappointment. "No," he said. "I'm a witness." That distinction mattered. The room understood it instantly. This wasn't Hopkins wielding power. This was Hopkins refusing silence. The studio's decision came the next morning. The director was removed from the project effective immediately. No press release announced it. No scandal broke online. The official explanation was creative differences. The same phrase Hollywood used whenever it didn't want to tell the full truth. But inside the industry, everyone knew. Word travels differently there. Not loudly, accurately. Crew members talk. Assistants talk. Agents talk. And this story carried a warning attached to it. The director tried to push back. Lawyers were consulted. Emails sent. Calls made to people he believed owed him favors. None of it worked. Because no one wanted their name anywhere near a situation involving a child being mistreated on set. Studios don't forgive many things, but this was one of the few lines that never moved. Anthony Hopkins returned to set 2 days later. A new director stood where the old one had been. Softer voice. Clear boundaries. The atmosphere changed immediately. The child actor returned too. They were quieter at first. Hopkins noticed. Before filming resumed, he walked over. "You all right?" he asked gently. The child nodded. "Yeah." Hopkins crouched slightly so they were eye level. "If anyone ever makes you uncomfortable," he said, "you stop. You don't explain. You don't apologize. You stop." The child nodded again, more firmly this time. The guardian watched from a distance, eyes wet. Filming resumed. The scene was done in 3 takes. Clean. Calm. Human. No fear required. Weeks later, the director's name stopped appearing on call sheets. Then on shortlists. Then in conversations altogether. He wasn't publicly disgraced. He was quietly erased. Which, in Hollywood, is far worse. Years later, someone asked Hopkins about that incident during an interview. "Didn't you worry about the backlash?" the interviewer asked. "About being seen as difficult?" Hopkins smiled faintly. "Being difficult," he said, "is refusing to tolerate harm." The interviewer pressed. "But you had power. Not everyone could have done that." Hopkins nodded. "That's why it mattered that I did." He paused. "Power that doesn't protect the vulnerable isn't power," he added. "It's decoration." The story circulated quietly over time. Not as gossip. As precedent. Directors remembered it. Producers referenced it. Actors told it to their agents in hushed tones. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was final. Anthony Hopkins didn't shout. Didn't threaten. Didn't moralize. He observed, spoke once, and refused to move. And that refusal to accept "that's just how it's done" ended a career that very day. Not with outrage. With clarity. That's what made it unforgettable.